try to provide an open platform to come together, discuss ideas. The book we're talking about today, this is our fourth meeting on All About Love by Bell Hooks. As I always say, this is your book club. If you participate, it becomes a better book club. If you don't want to participate, just hang out and drink a beer and whatever. We welcome that also. But you make this book club. You have to participate if you want to see the book club be a vibrant space. So I'm not going to say any more than that. Stephanie Alvarado is the facilitator, and she'll be kicking everything off tonight. I know, like Heidi had a question about our videos. Anytime anybody has a question, just shoot me an email. I usually respond right away. So Stephanie, you want to take it away?
Yeah. Thank you, Ron. Thank you, everyone, for showing up for your community and yourself and each other on this Tuesday, June 2nd, 2020. To kick off book club, I just, want to honor everyone for showing up and just take a moment to acknowledge that and what it means to make this decision for ourselves and for each other, to show up for yourself right now and to be in community. This is an exercise that is love in action, and I just want to name that for us before we get into the grounding exercises. And I guess this is also a way to invite you to ground yourself along with me in this moment before we get into conversation. Like Ron said, One Book, One Bronx is a book club. We're also a community, and we want to acknowledge what's going on, naming that we're literally living in a dictatorship where this is not anything new for some of us in terms of hyper-policing, specifically for Black folks throughout the diaspora. It's something that we need to name, and we've always talked about in book club. One of the first things that that came to mind for today for discussion was around Audre Lorde, the uses of anger. This is something that my roommate and I, Paula, were talking about last night. I live in Fordham, so I'm down literally in the Fordham neighborhood. And, we slept with helicopters. They were around till like 10 a.m. this morning. We went out and cleaned up this morning as well and saw how clean everything already was by the time we got there, which is amazing. So I just want to name the context in which we're having this conversation. I want to send love to all of you. And like I see all of you, this community, Ron particularly has an amazing job to hold this community together throughout these times. Our goal to have these spaces is to create authentic connections and create a healing space. So I just wanted to name those things for us before we get into grounding. And I just also want to be transparent as to where I'm at tonight and just kind of like share like, hey, this is where I'm coming from. And I love y'all so much. So, I'm here for y'all. And also if anyone wants to be a conversation, have suggestions, questions, comments, again, this space, you make it, and we're here to help guide it and to just be a witness to what it means to share together during this time that we're in, and try to create connections, authentic connections through this way. So thank you for that. We're going to start off with 3 deep breaths to ground us. So I invite you, if it's available to you, if you're able to put your feet flat on the ground, or if you're laying down, whatever feels comfortable to you. Wherever you are, try to allow some space and ease and movement for your belly and your lungs, and your nose, and any other movement that feels tight right now. Send breath to that place in your body. Many of us may be on our head all day. I know for me, I'm always in my head, and that's where like the most energy runs in. So I try to send breath to kind of balance it out and send the energy where I need it, other places like my heart or my lungs. My back in particular. So try to envision, if you can, when you're breathing in and breathing out, your favorite color, whatever color that may be. For me, it's usually a blue or a gold, and try to send that color to where you need love the most right now, wherever feels super tight. So we'll do this 3 times together. So we inhale. And exhale. Inhale. And exhale. Inhale. And exhale. Cool. Thank you, everyone, for that. We can take a moment to honor the land in which we're on and all the things that are happening within this land right now, and the history and the memory that the land holds. And I say that again in solidarity with Indigenous peoples, Black peoples, Indigenous peoples are the first peoples, we want to name that. And again, I say it in a way to remind us that it's not a mourning, it's a acknowledgement and solidarity and recognition and contextualizing of the place that we're in and politicizing it and understanding that we're colonized peoples, this is a colonized place that we're in, and what we're witnessing is the season finale of the United States happening. And so this is the moment that it's hard to take pause because it's just all the time. So let's take these 30 seconds to acknowledge the place that we're at, this land that we're on, where each of you are specifically in your day, in your life, wherever you are, second by second. Just take a moment for yourself and have that moment of reflection. We'll hold 30 seconds for that. And if you need more, keep going. Beautiful. So coming back from that, the last grounding exercise that we do together before we get into our conversations is to acknowledge those that came before us, our ancestors, our fallen comrades, our teachers who are no longer with us in the physical realm, who have gone to the spiritual realm, people who have touched your heart, your mind, your spirit in different ways to love literature, love culture, love community in whatever way, shape, or form that brought you here today to make this decision to be here with us. All of us learn from someone else. None of us, were just all knowing from the beginning. So this is the time to acknowledge those that came before us that have allowed us to be here, essentially. So you can say people's names out loud if you'd like. You can unmute yourself. You can also type it in the chat box. And if you don't want to say anything at all, we can still hold the space and honor those names that we may not know, those names that we may never know, and all those that we hold in our hearts.
Ronald Jones.
Neville Sutherland.
Langston Hughes.
Inez Foreman.
George Floyd.
Malcolm X.
Ahmaud Arbery. Peter Garcia. Jordan.
Leaf Router.
Cool. I'm gonna read the names in the chat. Tony McDade, Antazaki Shange, Fred Hampton, Tatiana Jefferson. Thank you, folks. Thank you, everyone, for showing up and for holding this space together as we ground ourselves before we get into conversation. Again, this space is for all of us to have a conversation about the book, whatever it is that people want to talk about. All I know is that when I started reading, the first thing that I read, and it just kind of, I had a moment, I was like, wow, sometimes when I'm prepared for this, it's like, all right, I need to write down the page numbers, the quotes, and it was like, sometimes the work does itself in a way. The first, on page 147, it says, love allows us to enter paradise. Oh, wait, not that one. It was another one around community, specifically. The opening line was around community. Yeah, community, loving communion. So I just wanted to start off with that to ensure human survival everywhere in the world. Females and males organize themselves into communities. Communities sustain life, not nuclear families or the couple, and certainly not the rugged individual. And here we are. So I just wanted to throw that out there, see any reflections or feeling, etc. Thank you, Lydia.
Can you repeat the passage again, please?
It was on page 129. To ensure human survival everywhere in the world, females and males organize themselves into communities. Communities sustain life, not nuclear families or the couple, and certainly not the rugged individualist. There's no better place to learn the art of loving than in community.
Yeah, so I think that when it comes to love, it doesn't only just come from just one person. I know in the book, she reminds us that although it is good to learn how to love yourself, you also have to, I guess, share that love with others and learn how others love as well. It's like the only way to, I guess, communicate that with each other and to learn how to do so. Yeah.
I feel like that passage is a good place to start off, considering everything that's happening. Because for me, the first time I've been in community in a long time, like literally week 12 of isolation for me started on Friday, was on Saturday when I went to a rally. And it was very strange to be with people, even at kind of a, not quite 6 feet, but a little, mostly socially distanced, to like stand up in the streets. And it's amazing how I was afraid, I think, you know, in previous weeks of like just being in the grocery store and someone gets a little too close or kind of surprises me. And then something like a moment just sort of crystallizes, like the need to like be around people. and be around them for a purpose, and being around them even in like anger and sadness, what is deep down a loving purpose, like standing up together collectively to make demands to make the world a better place. So this weekend, like the passage you just pointed out, kind of crystallized that actually it's coming out of love. It's a love for all the people around me to do that.
Mm. So I wanted to share too that one of the things that I wanted to bring up was just the action that happened today. In terms of the community cleanup, I don't know how many folks knew about what was happening on Fordham. And there, this morning, folks organized to clean up, and this afternoon too. So there was folks all up and down Fordham, the concourse, Jerome, doing a cleanup. And so
Stephanie,
I was out there.
Stephanie,
Yeah.
you should
Yes.
explain that these are streets in the Bronx for people who aren't from the Bronx.
Sorry. Yes. So these are streets in the Bronx that, in a neighborhood in the Bronx that I live in. And it was the sort of location of basically the rebellions and uprisings that have been happening in the Bronx for a while, and also like rioting. And I don't want to use this language. I think that it's very limiting. But yes, there was property destroyed. Mom and pop stores were destroyed, and I wanted to share some images because what was most stunning about going there today was seeing how by the time we got there, everything was already cleaned up, and then there were so many people cooperating and helping one another, and everything was sparkly clean. Like, it was crazy how quickly people organized to clean up what had happened, and then also understanding the different contexts of community is not always, that it can be very complex, right? Because there can be many different kinds of interventions that have been happening in these spaces of rebellion and uprising. So I wanted to check in if folks were cool with me sharing my screen to share those images. The images were taken by my sister, Gabriella Alvarado, who's a photographer. And we can have discussions over the images. There are some images that were very striking in terms of just how communities have been responding, and how like it actually looks like to exercise community. We can theorize about love, we can theorize about community. How does it actually look like in action, and how are we documenting and telling the stories of this particular time that we're in? So, Ron, are you cool with that?
Yeah, go ahead. I'm waiting for you to get started.
Okay. Oh, I think, I don't think I could share my screen. So maybe I'll just text the link, I think. Can you put it so that I can share my screen or no?
Let me see.
Yeah.
So I just made you a co-host.
Okay, perfect. Here we go. Okay, y'all. So these are images that were taken on Fordham Road in the Bronx, New York. This is a Dennis. Y'all know Dennis. It's kind of like a shopping store. Most of the store owners were accepting help, but there were some that were also rejecting help. So you had to always ask, right? And community is never a guarantee. It's always, especially if you're not from the community, it's always asking, right? If you're even able to help. So this sign was interesting in terms of like it saying Black and Dominican owned with like a tiny little hashtag, Black Lives Matter. This is like the epitome of like anti-Blackness in the Latinx community in many ways. And I wanted to like talk about that. I know oftentimes like Dominican folks get you know, sort of like made an example of in terms of that, but I also wanted to name that it's also about the proximity to whiteness that is inherently in that sort of attitude. So we can tell in this sign is that the biggest word on this sign is Dominican, you know, and then like the little hashtag is really, really small. And these are part of what community also complicates in many ways, and how it is that we love each other in a space like this, where we see this like super anti-Black sign, but people are showing up with brooms to help clean up, you know, because we understand that this is an interdependent network. It's many contradictions. There's not one way to think about community, specifically in the Bronx, and how homogenizing that can be. But anyway, I'll continue. This is just another image of retail stores that were damaged, and this is wood that they're now going to be like drilling into the sides of the building for protection. There was a lot of like check cashing places. The sign was also destroyed. This is Fordham. Pretty much you can see like all the damage that was done, and people all in front cleaning up. Like that was a whole group of a fraternity, Alpha Phi Alpha. They were out in the streets and they were like cleaning up. There was almost in every single storefront, there was people there just ready to clean up. This is the Blink. I think everybody is gonna get an alert right now about the curfew. So the car we saw. And what does it mean for a community to grieve? What does it mean for a community to like feel grief and love at the same time? Or the reason why, you know what I mean? Like this is what I've been feeling, I guess, today. And so this is the intersection. There was also people cleaning for clout, which was ridiculous. Like there were people like Ruben Diaz Jr. and Ruben Diaz were present at this intersection. And there was cameras there. There was ABC News, there was Bronx 12, CBS, all sorts of news. And they were definitely in the cameras and performing a lot of, I guess, activism or solidarity, whatever it is. So, yeah, you know, and you see like crowds of people, like with garbage bags and brooms. And I had never seen Fordham so clean. Like the one Fordham Plaza, I had never seen it. I was like, wow, like really, really move fast. This is all people putting that there. This is like the TJ Maxx in one Fordham Plaza. In the back, you can see the cash register next to the Nike box. This Walgreens had all these people in the front. There was a camera crew there too. There's evidence of the trash can on fire and people walking around in like sandals. Socks or no socks, that's like the thing. I thought that was Dominican cake. Somebody threw Dominican cake at a store. And if you don't know what that is, Dominican cake is very particular of this neighborhood. There's many bakeries in the Bronx. Dominican cake is a particular type of cake. If there's any Dominicans here that can correct me, please talk about the majesty that is that. I love it. It's my favorite dessert. So somebody threw it. This pharmacy, my local pharmacy that I was going to. This is right in front of the library. And that's one thing that you saw too. They did not touch the library at all. Library was left unscathed. Nothing on that block was touched. It was crazy. But right across the street from the library, the jewelry stopped that, or started yesterday. This is on my block. But yeah, so those are the images. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen so we can get back to conversation and see what people feel or see or think about the images, and how it's related to love and community. All right, people want to start.
I'm just speechless. Like my mind is, like I have so much in my head, but at the same time, my heart is heavy. I don't know what to say, but it's, I don't know, like I get the looting. Honestly, I know a lot of people are like, oh, you shouldn't be looting. Of course, no, mom and pop stores, but it's like, well, the kneeling didn't work, the voting and all this stuff. So it's like, no justice, no peace, literally, you know. But at the same time, somewhere in the book, I think that same chapter she was talking about, community being only possible with open and honest communication, and between the individuals, and the lack of the dysfunction within the community is, it's not real community. I think there is a lot of dysfunction within the community itself as well. That's why we can have mom and pop stores being broken into and robbed, and the sign, Black and Dominican owned and things like that. I just wish that we could all really organize and really get together and understand each other. And I think it's happening in many ways. But at the same time, I see a lot of anti-Blackness within our community as well. And it hurts, but part of me tries to stay away from the news, but then at the same time, I want to stay informed. I want to know what's going on. So I'm just like all over the place. And then I'm trying to just stay in a good mental space for this little one right here. But it's hard. It's like, wait till I tell her about the world she was born into.
This is a crazy time to be born into this world.
Yeah, born in the middle
Very
of the
special.
pandemic and a revolution.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I was gonna say, yeah, it's just a crazy time right now. It's a heavy time. I think we're seeing what love looks like, and we're seeing what love doesn't look like and hasn't looked like for Black people in this country for a very long time. And to that point, I just want to say, regarding the uprising that's going on, I'm not saying I necessarily condone it, but I'm not mad at it. And in a way, I understand, because people are crying to be heard. It's like the least of us, we're looking to be heard in this country. And it's like, until all of us are free, none of us are. And so, when Bell Hooks talks about the need for community and how love is impossible without it, I totally agree with, the points that she brings up, because, we need that. Human beings need that community, and we need to, have some type of acceptance and feel some type of belonging, and that's necessary. And for Black people in this country, it just has not been all the way there for us. Some people might be able to succeed within this capitalistic society. Some families might be able to come up, but as a collective, things have been very hard for us, from economically to socially, and with police brutality and everything that's going on. So yeah, I guess that's all I have to say. It's just like really heavy right now though.
I was reading some article on somewhere, and there's a guy, I'm in Dallas. He owns a restaurant in downtown Dallas, and they were interviewing because he's also a firefighter. And so I think about like, maybe he might have a little affluence, you know what I'm saying? But when they interviewed him, you know, they were asking him, well, how do you feel about the destruction to your building and to your, you know, to your establishment? He's like, I get it. He was like, I hate that this has to happen, but I understand. He said, I know that in a bigger scheme of things, sometimes this is part of progress. He said, I am not upset with anyone. He said, I'm going to clean it up. I'm going to, you know, rebuild, and it's going to be business as usual. He's like, but I'm not stopping any of the protests. I'm not fighting these people. He was like, I don't have a problem with it. And, you know, people are probably like pausing, like, what in the world? But like, that was so freaking, it boggles my mind, you know, just to think about like someone having the insight to think that far ahead, or to have that much compassion, you know. And I mean, he was a Black guy, you know what I'm saying? So I mean, clearly, you know, and I felt a touch of sadness for him, you know what I'm saying? Because like where this area is, it's Deep Ellum, so it's like there used to be a time, you know how it goes, 20, 30 years ago, where this was like, this land used to be where the Black people stayed. And then once they built the huge highway, and, you know, of course they cut right into it. And so, you know, it displaced a lot of people. And so Black people getting back into that neighborhood has been a huge, it's been a huge fight. And so for him to have his spot back in, you know, this area, which is affluently, you know, white now, I felt sad for him, you know what I'm saying? Because I mean, the hoops that he probably had to jump were probably just, you know, ridiculous, but his compassion just really moved me. People have, I mean, I've definitely participated in, what do you call it today? Blackout Tuesday. I have not been online, and part of me has like that FOMO situation going on. Where I'm like, what's going on right now? You know what I'm saying? Lord knows, you know. But at the same time, I've needed it. I've started regulating myself. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I would say burn it all down, but at the same time, like, wow, you know, I mean, I think he brought the perspective of like, what if like this is this person's livelihood, you know what I'm saying? Like legitimately how they would determine what bills are being paid for the next, you know, month or so. But I just don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
But that comes up in the book too, right? Where she talks about the idea of property being more valuable than people. And she makes this idea about like patriarchy and capitalism will have you thinking that you need to protect your things at all costs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the criticism that came out of, you know, a lot of the memes that came up is like, you care more about property than you do about Black bodies dying in the street, right? So like this idea of like buildings that are insured, businesses that are insured versus, you know, people who are going to get this money back. Perhaps I understand what you were talking about, Patasha, especially with small businesses. But I think like he had, like you said, that insight to know that the cause was just bigger than perhaps his business, right? And so that's something that I thought about as I was reading it as well. And just like the people who have been really much, like very much with the protesters and sacrificing, you know, to a certain extent for the cause. And I found that very admirable as well. But I think to go back to the other portions that we were talking about last week and the week before around capitalism and how that plays out, I was on one of my friends had posted a picture of, because I'm from Webster. So the Fordham area is very much known to me. You know, I shopped there as a teenager, like, you know, all throughout high school. You know, got my little skinny jeans and stuff from there, and that's a very important space, you know, for my adolescence. And people were posting that I grew up with on social media about
you know, why are people doing this? And then somebody posted under one of my friends' posts, like showing the video, like, oh, those are the real niggas with an ER at the end, right? And I just got really pissed about that because, again, that brought in the respectability of the whole situation, where it's like, oh, those are the scumbags, those are the low lives, right? And like, it really reduced the situation to something very like, you either this or you're that, right? And then also not understanding like the way capitalism plays out and the way that we attain value or worth according to what we have. It makes complete sense to me why somebody would take the jewelry. It makes complete sense to me why somebody would take the sneakers. It makes, you know, complete sense to me why those things would be taken. I'm not saying that it's right. I'm saying that it makes sense given what we value in this country, what we value. And then we tell poor people, you shouldn't value those things, right? Even though we see everybody else, all the advertisements tell us we should get these things. And then when the opportunity presents itself, people take it. And so I'm not condemning anybody in that regard. Like, I'm just not gonna do it. But it just really stood out to me that they, like, she speaks about this whole idea of the property, and the memes were very much in alignment with that response, you know?
Yeah, off that point too, I wanted to emphasize that the call to clean up the community, like, let's pick up trash together as a strategy of intervention and disruption, is not anything new. This action actually historically, in terms of social justice movements, the Young Lords in particular, that was one of their major actions that they did in Spanish Harlem in 1969, where they organized to do a community cleanup because sanitation was specifically neglecting communities of color by not picking up their garbage historically. And so this is actually tied to strategies done by earlier organizers as well, in terms of speaking against the fact that because the property value in our neighborhoods aren't as high as those on Park Avenue and wherever, we then, you know, don't have access to clean streets, don't have access to trash cans. I mean, it was only until recently that Fordham even had trash cans. I just want to also like name that as sort of like a lineage in terms of what we're talking about here of past interventions and relationships to property and value in Black bodies, and what that looks like.
And remember, King, before he was assassinated, was in Memphis because of the sanitation strike. So again, garbage and stuff not being picked up, and, you know, just that whole issue of, as you said, cleanup and having to do it yourself rather than it being done by the city.
So, hey everybody. Now y'all know I didn't read about the respectability politics last time, so thank God that was like my phew. But I did read this week's passages, chapters, and I feel that in this moment, bell hooks must have been in my head, especially the chapter around death. Right? Because I literally was just having a conversation with some of my friends, and I'm just like, I've always had like this comfortable relationship with death, but really have been delving in a lot more. Like, you know, we are conditioned to think as life as death as two separate things, when in actuality, life and death are one and the same. Like, even as we are breathing, things within us are dying. And so, like, the fact that we try to piecemeal them is just illogical. But I was just thinking about how a lot of us, I was thinking about the chant of, I can't breathe, right? And I feel like words have power. And so what does it mean to repeat the last words of someone who's transitioning, right? I happen to start taking this workshop with Race Forward. And one thing that the facilitator said that I thought to be really profound around what has happened to the indigenous people of this land is that he called it a failed genocide. And I was like, yes, a failed genocide. Like, you are trying to actively eradicate a people, but you are failing every single day, right? And so it made me then think about, well, what would it mean to say and chant in the streets, we will continue to breathe. Like, we will still breathing as you attempt to annihilate us. It comes, for me, it was just a shift from the moment of transition to a moment of a collective reckoning that you're not taking us out as the sirens go off behind me. So, and also with that, it's just like, I was also thinking about a lot of people are out in the streets, some with the best intentions and some with not, but also many of us not really knowing what it means to fight for life, right? Like, we're breathing, but we're not necessarily living, right? We are existing. So this distinction between, I'm gonna fight for Black Lives Matter, but then return to the monotony, right? The existence without purpose. What are you fighting for? You know, like, are we doing the introspection that it takes to really evaluate, okay, if I'm gonna be out here in these streets, what am I gonna do differently tomorrow? Am I really investigating what it means to have an additional breath, right? And then I'll lastly say, I attended this other workshop and I thought it was just like so profound. It was with Edgeridge Danticant and another Haitian scholar. And Edgeridge brought up this Haitian proverb that I've never heard before in my life, where live your life as if your coffin is underneath your armpit. I was like, yes, what does it mean to have a healthy relationship with death? Like, all right, I see you, cool. And I think that Bell Hooks did a really beautiful job in using death as a way to ensure that you live your life to the fullest. Are you doing the things that you want to do, or are you putting it to the back burner? So it really has been, I find that this week's passages have been really affirming for me, the things that have been coming up and resonating, and like, I'm not that crazy. And there is something to being married to death as a companion, as a friend, and be like, yo, I want you to live your whole life. Like, imagine the Grim Reaper is really saying, I want you to live, as opposed to, I'm taking you out.
Yeah, so just piggybacking off of what you said, on page 193, there's a part where she says, ironically, the worship of death as a strategy for coping with our underlying fear of death's power does not truly give us solace. It is deeply anxiety producing. The more we watch spectacles of meaningless death, of random violence and cruelty, the more afraid we become in our daily lives. It's like she wrote this a long time ago, but it's like she's writing it in terms of what's happening now. So it's just amazing what a book can do and what people, how intelligent people are. Yeah, this fear of minorities, this fear of Black people embedded in white people, or especially people who are just straight up racist, they have a fear. They fear us. And I think it's really scary to know that there's someone else out there that's scared of us, because we don't know what they're capable of. Or obviously now that it's all televised and all over the social media, you know, we're aware that there are policemen who are willing and able to shoot someone because of the fear that they have from just the color of their skin. And that's really scary to know that we live in a world like that. I don't know how we can fix it. And that's even scarier for me. Because to me, one of the things that can help those people who are racist is education. But how are you able to educate these people who are racist if they don't want to be educated on that topic? They have this narrow point of view where they believe that we are bad people, we steal, we are lazy, we're dirty. How can we change these people's mind if they're not able to change it? So I think that's more scary to me than the gun itself. Of course, a gun will kill a person, but to change someone's mind, it's scary.
Do you think love works in that way? That to change someone's mind, it is simply enough to introduce love into your relationship? Not a romantic kind of love, but an almost like a spiritual kind of love.
Well, I've always heard you can't change people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially if they don't want to. So if I were to try to speak to someone who is a racist and they're just not hearing it, I'm just wasting my energy on someone that just doesn't want to receive that positive energy from me. So it's hard. And that's where our anger comes from. I guess for the most part, that's where the looting comes from, is the fact that you will not hear us. You are unable to change your ways. So now I'm angry. So it's tough. I don't know how we can overcome that. I guess maybe one way is more of us become more political, is what I'm thinking. But even that thought, it's pretty hard because there are too many people that are in political, they're sitting in a political, what do you call it? They're politics, and like, we just need more people in the White House. We need more people that look like us, that have been through our struggle, that understand us. I think that's another way of changing. But it's tough.
Ron, I would love to answer, or at least give my.
Yeah, go ahead.
For me, I think in this moment, our call to love would be to reach out to those who are closest to us, or who we have access to. And I'm thinking specifically about how I'm seeing this go round, and it sucks to say this go round.
Exactly.
Yeah, but I've seen a lot of Black people calling out their white friends, like way more than it was whatever the last time was. Mm-hmm. Calling them out by name, saying, hey, what are you doing? I saw Jackie Ina, who's she's a makeup influencer. She called out, what's the clothing line? What's the clothing line? What's the name of the clothing line?
Fashion Nova.
Yes. She said, look, y'all have given me money, and that's great and all, but what are you doing? You have your Black adjacent women wearing the clothes, and you have the aesthetics of like, not quite, you're not the normal Black people, you know what I'm saying? But you have, the adjacent. What are you doing? And even now, I've been struggling for the last couple of days to talk to my friend who I adore. People know about this guy. We work together, love him to death, but he is silent. And so he's in my DMs asking, hey, how you doing? And for the last 4 days, I have not been able to answer him. And because I don't have the energy to do it. I don't have the energy to explain. I'm, you know, whatever my explanation is at the time, you know what I'm saying? You see it. If you don't see it, you know, or if you don't feel how I'm feeling, and then I struggle with that. Like, okay, how do I handle this? How do I handle this in a way to where I'm not going to make you feel okay and feel comfortable. I don't want to be belligerent, because I have just seen, I mean, I've seen celebrities and just people I follow all through social media. I mean, literally going on lives and just going off, like, just like, you know,
Beyonce said something
yes, and her
for
mom
the
was
first time ever.
yes, yes. I mean, everybody is just, you know, they're just livid. And I mean, I've seen them like calling out their friends by name. What are you gonna do? You see this, you're asking me, you're all in my DMs. Let me tell you, you know, Sharon, I am frustrated. What are you saying about it? Your last post was, you know, you and your puppy. What's going on? So I feel like our call to action, and Amanda still said it, like, we're not explaining anything else to you. We're, you know, and I feel that way. Like, I can't keep explaining because the information is there. It's always been there. It is at your disposal. You can go and do what you need to do by at least shaking that shit up on your end. Like, you need to post Black Lives Matter on your, you know, mostly white, you know, friends and family, and go ahead and get in the trenches when they respond and be like, what? You know, that's how you show your love. That's how they can show their love to you. And I think I'm going to show my love to him by saying, hey, you see what's going on. What are you doing? Like, post something, because you post things every day. Why aren't you posting about this? That's how I'm going to show my love.
I think that's how maybe we can do it on like a granular level, like one person at a time. I have a few white friends, and I found myself, instead of just saying, oh, I'm fine, I said, well, hey, you know, it's been a tough week. It's been a tough week for people in my household. And that sort of puts them on notice that, you know, we can't pretend that it's business as usual. And then I leave it at that and let the onus be on them to come back and do, as you said, their homework and say, oh, well, you know, I didn't realize you felt like this, or how are you feeling? Like, it sort of forces the ball into their court. And on another level, I think I heard during one of the news conferences that people were saying, the young lady before you talked about, we need more people. And we need more people, not just focused on the presidency, but we need more police commissioners. We need more school board people. And I think we tend to overlook those elections because we're too focused on the White House. Not that we shouldn't be, but we also need to go out and start building from the ground up.
It seems like we've been building from the ground up, and we're still having these conversations. I was struck by how many mayors of these cities are Black, and we're still having these conversations. You know, there is systematic racism that is greater than the color of the mayor. And there's also the power of unions not to accept or to block change within the police departments. So, like, you know, this is like year 400 and what, 12 or something that we've been having these conversations. And we're still struggling. People are still being killed, and, you know, things like that. And the killing, I mean, the killing is bad by itself. It's the covering up of the killings that how they almost, Ahmaud Marbury, they almost got away with that. It's only because somebody released the video. The same thing with George Floyd. Suppose there was no video. Like, you know, will we be having these conversations? Like, how could we build love, you know, kind of going forward if we keep seeing these like macro aggressions, against Black people. And then we have a president of the United States who is fully invested in, segregation, some kind of verbal segregation at least. I don't think we've ever had this where a president has been so committed to not being loving to all American people. Now, he may not serve all American people, based on politics, but like usually outwardly, they are decent people outwardly. And we just have a president now who needs to read this book, who needs, who needs to like really kind of connect back to a loving, nurturing society. Asha, you want to say something?
Oh shit.
Someone said if he could read. That's facts though.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like, though, related to what you just said, Ron, that one thing that's been kind of head spinning about this moment is that this moment is different. There's a way in which it feels like it's the same thing over and over again. But when you look at the official press releases, the tweets, the Instagram posts from various politicians, they're sort of saying close to the right thing, but their actions are exactly the opposite, right? Like you can say, oh, we understand the protesters, but we're going to put a curfew in. We're going to trap protesters in a certain place, and we're going to make sure that like a certain amount of arrests happen. And it feels like this weird collective gaslighting. Like, wait, I just heard you 2 hours ago, and I thought you said the right thing. I thought maybe change was going to happen, but no, like your actions, the system is still, it feeds off of a certain amount of a certain dynamic that like just keeps going. So even though you can like name check some stuff, like your actions are still going to be the same.
Yeah. That reminds me, no shade to anybody on the West Coast where I say this, but oftentimes people are in language and have the right words and the pretty words, and they know the latest or whatever, but have no idea what it means to practice and what it means to actually exercise that theory. So it means nothing if people can actually found a good copy editor and wrote like a really compelling caption for their IG post. It really doesn't matter. At the end of the day, it really feels even more insidious and even deeper in terms of gaslighting in the current moment in terms of organizing. It's actually really difficult to not get co-opted by a corporation or a brand that wants to capitalize on the fact that it's, some sort of progressiveness happening and how that's trendy right now. It's crazy. And also I wanted to name that it's a responsibility for not only white folks, but also like non-Black people of color and white passing Latinos and anybody who can be white passing to educate themselves and understand that the struggles that are going on now are not new. And if you're new to the consciousness, the movement, whatever work, then great, welcome. But also recognize that this has been happening for many, many, many years. There's been lots of organizing done. I mean, countless of people have been involved in like making not only this narrative around Black Lives Matter, but also conversations about police brutality, conversations around, identity politics and going on for a long time. So it's like, it's responsibility, to do most of the work at this point in time. I think also naming the fact, like what Patricia was saying, that, you're not going to tell white people anything. I agree. Like I'm totally with you there. And also understanding like that when people are tired, people need to rest. So also like creating space as like non-Black people of color, white passing, folks, to create space for Black folks to rest, create space for Black folks to do less labor and step up, to actually educate yourself, educate conversations, you know, it's easy to say that like racism looks very specific at this point, but it's the of like conversations that happen from my own perspective, you know, where you know, I had to have a conversation with my father around my brother who is Dominican and he's Black. He's dark skinned, brown skinned Dominican. And I was like, Dad, you have to understand that you've asked to father this adopted child from like his partner. And that's my brother. You have to understand that you're fathering a Black child now. What is that? You know? And having that conversation with my father, he had never, and this is someone's like, oh wait, what are you talking about? And fucking up people's like consciousness and like awareness of how race, racism, privilege, proximity to whiteness, how all that plays out historically to where we are today. So I just wanted to have that, you know, and say that in terms of response to what people were saying. Like, you know, I agree, Patricia, it's not Black folks' job to educate us at this point in time.
Can I read a passage? And I'm reading on my phone. I had to download an app and everything. So I don't know the exact page, but it's in chapter 11. And it might be a few pages into chapter 11. White supremacy has taught him, the white person, that all people of color are threats, irrespective of their behavior. Capitalism has taught him that at all costs, his property can and must be protected. Patriarchy has taught him that his masculinity has to be proved by the willingness to conquer fear through aggression. George Lloyd was, I'm still not clear, but it was a $20 counterfeit bill that led to his death. You know, that's kind of, if you think about that even if it was a real $20 bill, that these police officers so engaged him that they killed him for $20. And that's what it boils down to. You know, it's no more than this belief in capitalism must be, you know, barricaded and blocked off from everyone at all costs. And if you sort of cross that line for something as simple as $20, you know, it might cost you your life. And that's exactly what happened. And not only is it this $20 that he was trying allegedly pass off, the response to this $20, you know, that 4 police officers were called in for you know, a $20 counterfeit bill. It's bizarre to me.
A $20 bill with Andrew Jackson's face on it. The guy the guy who led the Trail of Tears. The guy who like, Trump is kind of the new Andrew Jackson in a certain way. I just read this book that's a history of America through a lens of slavery. And it's just like the parallels, I mean, many of you probably already know this, are just eerie. And also the bill that like, we were trying to put Harriet Tubman's face on. Like there's just so many resonances in this.
They block that cold.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's a minor point, but I just want to throw that out there too.
I blame y'all.
I mean, also, how many times are we going to repeat these stories, considering that, I mean, we could talk about every time a Black person who's unarmed or he wasn't really doing anything who got killed. It's Eric Garner was selling Lucy's and was choked to death. And it took 5 years to get that one cop fired. And now, 6 years after Eric Garner's killing, same way to get killed, all right? Saying he can't breathe, 8 minutes, 9 minutes, whatever it was that it took. And it's this is why, you know, the conversations have to get more radical. It's not enough about, you know, putting people of color in places of power. This is why we're hearing conversations about, you know, defunding the police and taking the more radical steps. You know, Minneapolis are taking those steps. Like, this is what needs to be done. I mean, even when the protests started, we were seeing, you know, you see white journalists are getting, you know, also shot with rubber bullets along with the black protesters. But then even now, black people are getting killed in the protests.
Yeah.
With McAtee getting killed, a fixture of his neighborhood. I'm now blanking on, was it Louisville? Or the young man in Omaha, Nebraska, killed during a protest as well.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's this conversation is going to constantly keep going unless, you know, we get more radical with how to reimagine what your communities need to look like. It's not about reaching the racists. They're not reachable. You have to coalition build the people who are reachable.
I always say that the only reason this country has made progress is because old racists have died. That you need that attrition of, you know, just old people who are racist dying and hoping that their children and grandchildren, you know, will be like more reasonable.
But how do we do that in this moment? Like, one thing I've been struck by is that we've got massive unemployment. We have all types of people dying for no reason, just through government incompetence. And we have bailouts to billionaires, right? Like, what is it gonna take to get that coalition going? I mean, I feel like in New York City, it's really easy to be marching down the street and march down, if you don't live in public housing, like see public housing projects and look at like, that's a death center right now, right? And understand that it's not just I can't breathe in this moment to honor, you know, the 3 big killings that we're thinking about, but also like those people can't breathe, right? The transit workers, right, who are dying unnecessarily. But like, what does it take to like join these collective struggles? Because most of us can't breathe, literally, right? So many communities are decimated that aren't, you know, obviously predominantly Black and brown, but like also poor white people like live with, you know, fracking, their water just been lighted on fire. Like, what does it take to like get that to happen? And if this moment can't create that with utter systemic failure, sorry?
What's that, Tosh?
Sorry, I was responding to Stephanie's comment. Yeah.
Well, anyway, yeah, like I feel like we're seeing so many systems fail at the same moment. And like, how many more deaths do we need to like understand that this is systemic, obviously affecting some people more than others, but it's affecting all of us.
Yeah, every death we think this will be it. This will be the one that changes the system. And we still at it. Still trying to change the system.
Well, in my world, in my little imaginary world, I think one way that we can possibly, I don't know, try to improve the situation is if we reevaluate those who are in positions like the police that we have, and see where they stand when it comes to racism. And if, I don't know, if they have some type of idea that, you know, racism is okay, it's okay to treat minorities, it's okay to treat Black people the way they've been treated, then you shouldn't be in this academy. You shouldn't be part of the NYPD or, you know, any type of police department in the United States. But again, that's something that I guess in a utopian world, well, in a utopian world, there wouldn't be any racist people, but I guess you guys know what I'm trying to say is that maybe if we reevaluate the people who are in these big positions and then see who they truly are, if we have the power to remove these people, then we can improve our society today. But it's going to take a lot of people from our end to do something like that, and we have to unite, educate ourselves, and strategize, and be patient too, because this is not going to happen overnight. You know,
It's not going to happen overnight. Yeah, it's not going to happen overnight, but it's been going on for a really long time. I mean, if you think about it. So it kind of should happen overnight because it's been going on for 100 years.
You can put
What's
a
that?
curfew in overnight.
What's that?
You can
Right.
put a curfew in overnight.
Right. I mean, I would say like at least since the Civil War or the Emancipation Proclamation, you know, it sort of promised freedom to all Black people. That was what, 1890 or whatever?
65.
1880 something? What's that?
1865 when it actually took hold because the war ended in 65.
So from 1865 to 2020? Yeah, it should happen overnight now. They had enough time to get it right. So
I think you're talking too about like theoretical, like how do you really get to tell if somebody's racist, right? And like the idea that does it take for you to shoot somebody and kill them for you to determine that we can now say that you're guilty of racism? Like that's very difficult to like say. You can't. It's very difficult to prove intent. It's difficult to prove a lot of stuff. So I think the real thing that comes out of that, and I've been thinking about this a lot lately in terms of like outcomes. Like, what the hell are we even asking for? What do we even want? Do we even want police? Can we imagine a community that does not involve them being, in, you know, in our communities? Like, what does that look like? Also, just thinking about, like, I think D.L. Hughley or somebody posted it, like, taxpayer dollars are put out to do payouts to families when somebody's killed. If that shit came directly out of their money, their pensions, their, you know what I mean? Like, you would have a lot of people, like, not pulling that trigger as fucking quickly. As if it was coming out of your family's mouth, because at that point, we cannot keep sitting here saying like, we'll pay for your fuck up, right? I pay my taxes so that you can go pay for my cousin to get killed. Like, no, then I just help pay for my cousins. You know what I mean? Like, that doesn't make any sense. So I think like, unless you have like a concrete way that you're gonna ask for like, when these things happen, this is what it is. And honestly, once you have deadly force, right? And it's like crazy as hell for no reason at all. We can't really even get, when we're talking about $20 bills and all kinds of nonsense, like you should automatically have a minimum sentence of something, right? Like regardless, because it's so stupid, right? And your whole job, is antithetical to your job and your function, right? Your job and your function is to serve and protect. And the minute that is violated is the minute that you should automatically get some sort of penalty. And I know like with people who are abolitionist thinkers and stuff about like abolishing prisons, you know, I get all of that, but like until that's abolished, like then you need to follow whatever the hell is going on right now. And we need to just figure out like how to hold people accountable in a way that makes some sense. So I don't know. I just felt like that it has to be more concrete than like, can we root out the racist ones, and how do we determine that? Like, I don't know what racist tests they can take to determine their racist score. You know what I mean? I don't know what that means. So I'm very interested in like, you know, what do we really want out at the end of all of this, when everybody's done the cleanup, when we're allowed to go outside again, like what do we want?
Well, we aren't allowed to see their disciplinary records, and that's by state law in New York. So there's like a movement to try to repeal, I believe the code is called 50A. So you see a lot of repeal 50A. Yeah, that it's about actually removing that shield so we publicly can see what their disciplinary records are. Now, that's a small matter relative to the greater thing that you're bringing up about, you know, if we have like 3 strikes laws in certain parts of the country, if we have mandatory minimums, like why can't we have the same thing for when the state institutes violence on its own citizens? But like a small thing that might determine like who's racist is like, I mean, come on, they follow these things. Like people break rules and they document it in the same way that like when I do something stupid at work, I have an HR record too.
Also, I think too much energy is wasted on determining whether individual people are racist. And I feel like this conversation has happened in the media about Trump When meanwhile, like, I mean, everyone knows he's racist, but it's like they waste so much energy. Like, all right, well, can you name 10 things he's done? It's like, well, the history's there, and we waste all this time. Like, oh, is this cop racist? It's like, well, he's part of an institution that is racist. So
Right.
whether it's a white cop, a black cop, or Asian cop, they're all enforcing or reinforcing white supremacy, whether they're directly benefiting from it or not. So I feel like it's like kind of tackling the institution, which, yes, through abolition, I'm not going to get on my soapbox there, but that is the goal here. If you really want a community-based building and communities looking out for each other and operating based on a love ethic, to go off of the Bell Hooks chapter on values, you can't do that with policing. And good public policy, if it's built out of love, isn't going to come from elected officials. It's going to come from the people in the communities.
True, true.
Can let's go back to the, this notion of love. But there was, I mean, I highlighted a whole lot this week. But when she was just talking about like what can we do, I think someone said on a granular level, on the page of 188, she writes on the paragraph above, we sacrifice our old selves in order to be changed by love, and we surrender to the power of the new self. And then she ends the chapter with using that fearless will to bond and connect as a catalyst for choosing and committing ourselves to love. We are able to love truly and deeply, to give and receive a love that lasts, a love that is stronger than death. I bring that up to say that, and I think there was something else in the, oh yeah, in 185, she's like, the experience of true love gives us the courage to risk. So I know she spent a lot of time talking about it in a romantic setting, but I also wanted to lift up that you can have those type of experiences with friends as well as family members. You know what I mean? Like, I have friends where our relationship is just as intimate outside of any sexual context, you know what I'm saying, that really impact my own life. And I think she said something about, like, what does it mean? I think when the woman partner realizes that her male partner is not what's up, and she values her own self-love, and then just is like, I gotta go. I mean, what would it mean to put the value in ourselves in a way that we haven't done before, either in a very long time or before? Because I'm thinking about, for me, when I see the cops out there on the streets, I know the ultimate end goal is not to kill all Black people. Because as an oppressor, if you kill all the oppressed people, you relinquish your power. If there's no one else left to oppress, then you are not then who are you gonna oppress? You're oppressing yourself, and that would be futile. So these heinous acts are just a way to instill fear and a way of thinking that we particularly buy into. So, like, again, tying it back with the chapter about death, like, I was thinking about myself because I recently got pulled over with a friend of mine. I had to quell my own reaction because I feel like I would be on some Sandra Bland type stuff, but I can't act that way at the consequence of my two friends. You get what I'm saying? And so they didn't agree to that type of inaction. So I'm just like, all right, I'm gonna chill. But it's just like, what would it mean to make these individuals with a God complex actually work for the God complex? Like, if you're gonna like come for me, I'm gonna make you sweat. You know what I mean? Like, it shouldn't be like this easy way to facilitate this oppression. And so what would it mean that it's not something that individuals do, but as a mass, where the police department is then questioning their actions because they recognize that the majority of the people are going to push against it as opposed to just cower as a way of self-love.
Thank you, Tasha, for that. It's 8:32. I just wanted to bring us back to the time that we usually close is 8:30. I just wanted to hold space for a few more minutes if anyone else has thoughts before we end and finish discussing this book. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight. We'll just take one collective breath together to close out our conversation and then regroup. Thank you so much. So if it's available to you, find somewhere comfortable to take a deep breath in and release for yourself tonight and for everyone here. Thank you, everyone. So inhale and we exhale. Thank you so much.